He collapsed in the rain at 2 a.m., bleeding, unconscious, his breath slipping away. She didn't know his last name could start wars. But when Sophie Lane called the number in his wallet, she didn't reach a hospital. She reached the Mafia Boss of Brooklyn. 4 minutes later, 3 black Cadillacs screeched onto the street, and her life was never hers again. This is the night a waitress crossed into a world built on blood, silence, and impossible choices. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? I'd love to see how far this story travels. It was past 2 in the morning when Sophie Lane stepped out of Harbor Diner, exhaustion weighing her shoulders like soaked wool. The rain hadn't let up since dusk. Cold, needling drops that clung to her clothes and blurred the streetlights into long, trembling smears. Her sneakers squelched with each step, and every muscle in her body begged for warmth, for dry socks, for silence. Brooklyn slept restlessly around her, quiet but twitching in its shadows. She was halfway down Cranston Avenue, just past the boarded-up florist, when she saw him. A figure, crumpled, unmoving, collapsed against the bricks like someone discarded. Sophie froze. The street was empty. No traffic, no footsteps. Just the sound of the rain tapping the awning above her. Something in her stomach shifted. She stepped closer, her breath catching when she saw blood darkening his shirt, spreading out in sick, wet patterns. His skin was pale, almost gray under the flickering street lamp. Young, maybe her age. Handsome if he hadn't looked half dead. "Hey, can you hear me?" she whispered, kneeling beside him. No answer. His breathing was shallow, wrong. Panic flared in her chest, but she pressed fingers to his neck. Pulse. Weak, but there. She fumbled in his jacket, looking for a wallet, a clue, something. Her fingers found leather. Inside, his ID, Elias Marino. The name buzzed somewhere in her brain like a distant alarm. Then she saw the other card, matte black, heavy, with silver embossed letters. It didn't say hospital. It didn't say in case of emergency with a family member's name. It just said, in case of emergency, call Vincent Marino. The air around her shifted. The world tilted slightly. She knew that name. Everyone in this part of the city did. Vincent Marino didn't show up on TV or newspapers, but he ruled things. The kind of man who could shut down a city block with one phone call. The kind of man whose name no one said aloud. At least, not without checking over their shoulder first. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number. Her thumb hovered over the call button for a full second before she pressed it. It rang once. Then a voice answered. Deep, measured, slow, like a loaded gun being cocked. "Who is this?" She swallowed hard. "My name's Sophie Lane. I found someone. I think he's hurt. His ID says Elias Marino." The voice didn't change, didn't rise, just turned cold. "Where are you?" "Cranston and 5th. He's bleeding. I don't know how bad." "Don't move. Don't talk to anyone. I'll be there in 5 minutes." The line went dead. She stared at her phone like it might explode in her hands. The rain seemed quieter now, or maybe her blood was just too loud in her ears. She stayed kneeling next to Elias, listening to the wet gurgle of his breath. Then, headlights. Not one car. 3. Black Cadillacs, windows tinted pitch dark, gliding to a stop without sound. Men in tailored coats stepped out, silent as shadows. The middle car's door opened last. The man who stepped out wasn't tall, but he felt tall. Vincent Marino looked like power had shaped his bones. Silver hair combed back sharp, black gloves on his hands, the kind of face that didn't flinch from anything. His eyes fell on Elias, and something unspoken and deep, passed through his expression. He crouched beside his son, checking his pulse, then stood. Dr. Raines arrived next, brisk and clean-cut, pulling on gloves as he knelt down. "Poison," he muttered after a minute. Mixed into a drink, fast-acting, someone meant for him to collapse. Vincent's eyes lifted to Sophie, steel meeting softness. "You just happened to find him?" His voice didn't accuse. It dissected. I work at the diner around the corner," she stammered. "I was walking home." "She saved his life," Dr. Raines cut in. "If she hadn't called, he'd be dead." Vincent was silent for a long, crushing second. Then he nodded once. "You saved my son, but saving a Marino never comes free." He stepped closer. She caught his scent. Gunmetal, cologne, rain. "Forget tonight, Miss Lane. In my world, good intentions can get you killed." He turned back to his car. A gesture, and his men carried Elias inside. Moments later, they were gone. The rain returned to being just rain. The street was empty again. But Sophie Lane would never be the same. Vincent Marino didn't yell. He didn't panic. He didn't waste a single movement. Everything about him felt calculated, like a chess player who always knew the next 6 moves. Inside the back seat of the Cadillac, Elias lay across the leather, pale but alive. Dr. Raines worked quickly, injecting something, checking vitals. Vincent stood by, silent, watching his son breathe. And then, without turning his head, he spoke. "Keep him alive. No mistakes." His tone wasn't threatening, it was final, as if the concept of failure didn't exist in his vocabulary. The next night, Sophie sat in her tiny apartment above a laundromat, still wearing the same jacket, still staring at the burner phone someone had slipped into her mailbox earlier that day. No message, just a number saved under unknown. She hadn't told anyone about what happened. Not her coworker Julia, not even the tired cook who always gave her extra fries. She'd tried to go back to normal, but her hands still shook when she washed dishes, and her sleep came in fits and starts. When the phone finally rang, she almost dropped it. She didn't answer. She couldn't. But the message that followed was clear. "Come outside." Her heart thudded in her chest as she peeked through the blinds. A man in a gray overcoat leaned against a car, one of the same Cadillacs. He didn't knock. He didn't look up. He simply waited. 5 minutes later, Sophie found herself inside the vehicle, trying not to fidget as the city blurred past. They drove in silence until the buildings thinned out into stone and steel and private gates. The Marino residence wasn't just a mansion, it was a fortress. Ivy crawled up the stone columns, spotlights lit the grounds like a museum, and guards stood like statues at every corner. When the car stopped, Sophie stepped out and felt the weight of the place settle on her shoulders. Inside, everything was quiet. Too quiet. A butler guided her down a hall without saying a word. Crystal chandeliers dangled like icicles overhead. Polished floors reflected her every step. Then, the doors opened. A dining room the size of a ballroom. At the head of the table sat Vincent, wineglass in hand, dark suit untouched by time or weather. "Miss Lane," he said with a nod. "Sit." Sophie obeyed, unsure what else to do. Across from her, a place was already set. Lamb, untouched. Red wine, cloth napkin folded with military precision. "You saved my only son," Vincent said, not quite thanking her. "That gives you a certain visibility. Visibility can be dangerous." She swallowed hard. "I didn't do it for anything. He was hurt." "Yes," Vincent replied, "but intentions don't shield you from consequences, not in this city." Elias wasn't at the table. Sophie wondered where he was, if he was still recovering, or if this was some kind of test. Vincent studied her with unsettling stillness. Then, finally, "My world is built on loyalty and silence. You've entered it, whether you like it or not." The rest of the dinner passed in a surreal haze. Elias never appeared. The guards never spoke. The tension wasn't loud. It was sharp and constant, like a wire stretched too tight. Before she left, Vincent walked her to the door himself. Rain had started again, just a light drizzle this time. He stopped by the threshold and said, almost softly, "A good heart is a rare currency in this city, Miss Lane. You should guard it before someone buys it." She met his eyes for the first time. Something behind them flickered. Not warmth, but perhaps memory. She didn't respond. Just nodded, turned, and walked into the night. 10 blocks from the estate, headlights began trailing her. No horn, no voices, just the quiet hum of tires on wet asphalt. At first, she thought it was a coincidence. Then she turned down a side street, still there. She crossed an alley, still there. Finally, a voice drifted from the dark, low and unplaceable. "You shouldn't have crossed paths with the Marinos." Her feet froze in place, but when she turned, there was nothing there. Just mist. Just silence. And now, a door had opened that would never fully close again. 3 days passed like a slow bleed. Sophie buried herself in shifts. Breakfast rush, lunch lull, dinner chaos. Anything to keep her mind from replaying the image of Elias bleeding in the rain or the glint in Vincent's eyes when he'd said her name. She hadn't touched the burner phone again. Every time it buzzed, she let it ring. Denial became her defense. If she didn't answer, maybe the memory of that night would dissolve into just another bad dream. But Brooklyn didn't forget. And neither did the Marinos. It was Thursday, when the black Rolls-Royce pulled up across the street from Harbor Diner. No one got out at first. Just the purr of the engine beneath the rain-slicked morning. Sophie tried to ignore it. She balanced coffee on one arm, cleared plates with the other, smiled at regulars, scribbled orders. But the hostess came back from the front looking pale. "Someone's asking for you," she said. "Booth 9. Sophie frowned. "Who?" "Didn't give a name," the hostess murmured. "But he said you'd know." Sophie's legs moved before her brain did. She rounded the corner and stopped cold. Elias Marino sat there, alive, clean-shaven, dressed in a black turtleneck and charcoal coat like nothing had ever touched him, except his eyes. Those hadn't healed. There was a softness there now, something haunted buried beneath charm. He stood as soon as he saw her. "You're here," he said simply. "I didn't think you'd come." She didn't sit. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to thank you," Elias said. He slid an envelope across the table. "Properly." Sophie didn't look at it. "You think this is about money?" His smile flickered, not quite smug, not quite sad. "No, but I had to offer it." She pushed the envelope back toward him. "I didn't do it for anything." Elias nodded. "Then," he surprised her. "I know. That's why I wanted to do something else." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a different card. This one plain white, embossed only with a phone number and a single name. "Come with me," he said. "Just for an hour." She hesitated. Every instinct in her body screamed no. Every rule she'd lived by, the ones about staying out of trouble, about avoiding shadows, about keeping her head down, all pulled against her curiosity. But then she remembered the voice in the dark. The car that followed her for 10 blocks. The whisper that told her she'd already crossed a line. Maybe there was no safe anymore. "Just an hour?" she asked. Elias smiled. "No pressure, no black cars this time, just us." Against every ounce of logic, she nodded. He took her to a small cafe tucked between a bookstore and a flower shop near the East River. It wasn't flashy. In fact, it was almost forgotten by time. Cobblestone steps, ivy curling over the doorframe, a faint smell of cinnamon in the air. They sat by the window, overlooking the water. "I used to come here when I skipped school," Elias said, "before my name started meaning something else." Sophie looked at him carefully. "And what does it mean now?" "Debt," he replied. "Power bought with blood. influence bought with fear. He paused. But when you saved me, it felt like I got to be just a person again. The words hung between them. Sophie didn't know what to say, so she didn't try. Elias didn't fill the silence either. He just looked at her, like he was seeing something unfamiliar and comforting at once. You didn't just save my life, he said quietly. You changed its direction. She should have laughed, or walked away. But something about the moment felt real, stripped of suits and shadows. Why me? She asked. Because you didn't look away, he answered. Most people would have just kept walking. He dropped her off an hour later, just like he promised. No escort, no threats. Just a quiet goodbye at the corner near the laundromat. As he turned to go, he hesitated. Things are going to get louder soon, he said. You might hear my name in places you didn't expect. But if you ever need anything, call that number. Sophie stood in the rain long after he was gone, holding the white card like it might burn through her fingers. 1 hour, he'd said. But something told her. It had already changed everything. The Marino estate didn't look real. It looked like a place drawn from memory or myth, set back from the road behind wrought iron gates, cloaked in shadows even under a cloudless sky. Sophie hadn't meant to come. She told herself over and over it was a bad idea, that curiosity didn't justify walking into the heart of Brooklyn's most whispered name, but curiosity had teeth. And when Elias called the second time, his voice gentler, touched with something like hope, she found herself saying yes. The car that picked her up didn't blast music or chatter, just silence and leather. The driver wore gloves. No questions, no small talk. As they pulled through the gates, Sophie's breath caught. The house loomed 3 stories tall, stone-faced, its windows dark like eyes that had seen too much. Ivy curled up the walls like veins. The lawn was too perfect, the silence too clean. Inside, the air shifted. She was met by a man in a gray suit who offered no name, only a gesture. This way. Marble underfoot. Oil paintings above. Everything polished to the point of erasing history. No sound of life, no clocks ticking, no echo of staff. Just stillness. At the far end of the hall, double doors opened into a dining room soaked in shadows and gold trim. Vincent Marino stood waiting, one hand resting on the back of an empty chair. Miss Lane, he said with that razor-smooth calm. Welcome. She didn't know whether to thank him or apologize. I assume you didn't come here for the food? He said, as he gestured to the chair beside Elias, who sat already, clean-cut, quietly smiling, the only warm thing in the room. Sophie sat, spine stiff. The table gleamed with silver cutlery, porcelain dishes, untouched bread. It looked more like a ritual than a meal. Vincent took his place at the head, posture perfect, eyes unreadable. You've entered a house built on silence and loyalty, he said. Not everyone leaves it alive. The words didn't sound like a threat. They sounded like prophecy. Sophie's fork hovered above her plate. Elias tried to cut the tension with light conversation. Small stories about school, about the cafe they visited, about how the weather used to be gentler in the fall. Vincent didn't interrupt, he just watched. Occasionally he nodded. Once he poured wine, but mostly he listened like a man calculating something deeper than words. When dessert came, untouched, Vincent stood. Walk with me, Miss Lane. It wasn't a request. Outside, the air was sharp with the scent of wet leaves and distant ocean. They moved past the hedges in silence, shoes crunching on gravel. Finally, he said, You're not from this world. That makes you interesting, but it also makes you fragile. Sophie didn't respond. He continued. A good heart is a rare currency in this city. Most spend it too fast. Some sell it. Others bury it. He stopped walking and looked at her directly. I don't know yet which kind you are. She met his gaze. Neither do I. Vincent smiled. Barely, then turned back toward the house. As she waited by the door for the car, Elias appeared beside her. You okay? He asked. She nodded, then paused. Why did you really invite me here? Elias shrugged. I wanted you to see it. The machine I'm part of. So you'd understand what it means when I say thank you. Sophie looked up at the towering estate, the guards, the perfectly placed lights that revealed nothing. It doesn't feel like a home? Elias's voice dropped. It's not. It's a vault. For secrets. For bloodlines. That night, she walked the 10 blocks from where the car dropped her off back to her apartment. She noticed the headlights behind her after the third turn. They didn't honk, didn't speed up, just followed. At first, she thought maybe it was paranoia, but then a corner light went out just as she passed. And then, just before she reached her building, a voice slid out from the darkness. Low, slithering. You shouldn't have crossed paths with the Marinos. She spun, but the street was empty. No footsteps, no movement. Just the cold creeping into her chest, and the knowledge that someone had noticed her and wasn't going to forget. Sophie didn't tell anyone. Not about the voice, not about the car, not about the cold that followed her into sleep. Instead, she worked. Diner shifts, grocery runs, paycheck math on a notepad that never balanced. But under all of it, she felt the shift, the city watching her. Small things. A man staring too long near the subway stairs. A paper with the name Marino circled in red ink left on her stoop. A call that hung up the moment she said hello. Someone wanted her scared. Someone wanted her to understand that proximity to the Marinos meant debt. And debt meant danger. So when she got the anonymous text, "Come to Pier 17. Alone. She didn't call Elias. She should have. But part of her was done with shadows talking through other shadows. If someone wanted answers, they could get them face to face. It was dusk when she arrived, the air sharp with salt and rot. The old pier stretched like bones into the East River, lined with rusted rails and forgotten crates. Sophie walked steady, jaw clenched, heart pounding hard enough to bruise her ribs. She didn't carry a weapon. She didn't need one. She wasn't here to fight. She was here to end the whispers. She didn't expect 3 men. They stepped out from behind a container. Broad shoulders, mismatched jackets, scars on their knuckles and spite in their eyes. Not Marino, not even subtle. These were Bianchi men, the Marinos' oldest rivals, the kind of men who preferred knives to contracts. The leader stepped forward, smile stretched too thin. Didn't think the girl would actually show. Sophie didn't flinch. You sent the message? We sent the message, he corrected. You've been making friends in high places, dangerous friends. That makes you interesting. I don't know anything, Sophie said flatly. I saw a man bleeding and called for help. Wrong man, the second guy said. Wrong help. The third pulled a blade from his belt. Nothing dramatic, just business. Tell us what you saw in the mansion, he said. Who was there? What was said? What Vincent's planning? Don't lie. We know you've been inside. Sophie didn't move. You're wasting your time. I don't know anything. The leader shrugged. Then you won't miss much. He took a step closer. Then, headlights. 3 at once. Blinding beams split through the mist and slammed across the dock. Engines roared as black sedans surged forward like sharks in dark water. The Bianchi men turned, too slow. Doors opened. Elias walked out first. No suit this time, just black jeans, black coat, eyes full of steel. His voice was low, calm, deadly. You made a mistake touching what's mine. The men hesitated. but only for a second. One lunged, knife raised. Gunshots cracked the air before he reached Sophie. Elias didn't flinch. His men didn't miss. Two of the Bianchi scattered into the dark. One went down. The third ran. It wasn't a brawl. It was an execution with precision. When the dock went still again, Sophie was shaking. Elias stepped forward, offering his hand. She took it. She didn't speak. Neither did he. They just stood there, her fingers cold in his grip like gravity. "You're not safe anymore," he said quietly. She tried to protest. "I can go home. I can lie low. I'll stay out of this." "No," he interrupted. "It's too late. You're already in it." She looked around, the pier soaked in tension and silence and blood. "Where, then?" she asked. "Where do I go?" Elias met her eyes. "With me." And for the first time, after all the warnings, all the threats, all the logic that had screamed run, Sophie nodded. No hesitation, no protest. Because in that moment, between the echoes of gunfire and the cold bite of river wind, she realized something terrifying. She trusted him. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse with a soft chime that felt like the last breath of normal life. Sophie stepped out onto cool marble floors, her reflection wavering beneath her feet. Floor-to-ceiling glass wrapped around the open space, revealing the Hudson stretched wide and restless below. The city blinked back at her in fractured reflections, skyscrapers and river shade and headlights all bleeding together in silence. She turned slowly. The place was sleek, modern, sterile, too perfect. No clutter, no color, no hint of a life lived. A beautiful prison. Elias stood by the bar, pouring tea into delicate white porcelain cups. No whiskey, no scotch, just silence and steam. "I didn't think you'd want anything strong after tonight," he said. She didn't sit, just stared at him, unsure of what to ask first. He pushed a cup toward her. "Drink. It'll help." Sophie finally lowered herself onto the couch. Her body was still humming from adrenaline, every joint tight with survival. She took the tea, sipped. Jasmine. Warm. Steady. "That wasn't just some random ambush," she said, her voice too calm for what she'd just survived. "Someone sent them knowing where I'd be." Elias didn't answer immediately. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Eyes on the floor like he was weighing every syllable before letting it go. "No one outside our inner circle knew you were staying quiet," he said. "No one except my father, and someone who sat at that dinner table." Sophie looked up sharply. "You're saying someone from your own family sold me out?" "I'm saying someone inside has been trying to hit me through the seams," Elias replied. "That poison wasn't meant to kill me. It was meant to humiliate my father, to show he can't protect his blood." His tone was flat, professional. But Sophie could see it in the way his jaw tensed. This wasn't strategy. It was personal. "In your world," she said slowly, "humiliation is worse than death." "Always," Elias replied, "because it cracks the throne. And once the crack's there, everyone starts looking for a way in." He turned to face her fully, stepping closer now. "My father taught me that the strongest weapon is fear, but someone's trying to turn that weapon against us." Sophie held his gaze. "So why bring me here? Why not send me away? Somewhere safer?" Elias tilted his head slightly. "Because the moment you stepped into that alley and called his number, you stopped being a bystander. You saw too much. Now you're a piece on the board, whether you want to be or not." She exhaled slowly, pressing her palms against her knees. "You talk like everything's a game." "It is," he said, "but the stakes are real." Then, his voice dropped softer. "And I brought you here because I trust you." Sophie blinked. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said. You called a stranger's father in the middle of the night, knowing nothing except that he mattered to someone. You didn't run. You didn't ask for anything. That's rare. The city outside shifted. Sirens in the distance, wind against the glass, the occasional honk of a cab trying to beat a light. But inside, time slowed. Elias sat across from her, close now. Close enough that she saw the scar just below his jawline, nearly hidden by shadow. You learn not to trust anyone in this life, he said. Until someone like you shows up. Sophie didn't respond right away. She looked down at her hands, still faintly trembling. You say that like it's a compliment, she said, but it feels more like a warning. Elias gave a short, quiet laugh. Maybe it's both. They sat in that silence for a long moment, the only sound the river brushing the glass behind them, like the city was trying to speak, but couldn't quite form the words. Sophie realized then, it wasn't just Elias's name that made him dangerous. It wasn't his guns or his guards or the weight of his father's empire behind him. It was the way he still felt human in a world built to erase exactly that. And now that she'd seen it, she couldn't look away. The penthouse at night felt like a chapel without faith. Silent, cavernous, heavy with unseen weight. Outside, the Hudson shimmered under city lights, glass and water blurring together until Sophie couldn't tell where one world ended and the other began. Elias stood by the window, his reflection fractured against the glass. My father thinks love is a weakness, he said, not turning. He used to say it's the first thing enemies sniff out, the first thing they exploit. Sophie watched him, unsure if he was speaking to her or to himself. He's not wrong, Elias added, but it's also the only thing that still feels real. He turned now, slowly, like the words had cost him something. I grew up with rules, no birthdays, no sleepovers, no friends without background checks. I got my first watch when I was 6, and my first gun when I was 10. He said I needed to learn the value of time and the cost of hesitation. Sophie leaned back against the couch, her voice soft but steady. What did you want instead? Elias smiled, a flicker of something more innocent. I wanted to breathe without permission. He sat across from her, arms resting on his knees. You think I chose this life? You think I wanted to be the heir to a kingdom built on fear? He shook his head. I wanted to be a doctor. I studied anatomy under candlelight when I was 12. Hid textbooks behind floorboards so the guards wouldn't tell my father I was soft. Sophie's breath caught. What happened? Reality, he said. My mother died. And the day we buried her, he handed me a leather-bound ledger and said, Your education begins now. They fell into silence, not the kind that demanded escape, but the kind that slowly pulled two people closer without words. Sophie saw him clearer now, not the man who stepped out of black sedans with guns at his back, but the boy who once wanted to heal instead of harm. You ever wish you'd walked away? She asked. Every morning, Elias replied, and every night I remember why I didn't. Because of your father? Because of the people who would rip this world apart if we weren't there to keep them afraid. Sophie folded her arms, eyes narrowing. And you think fear's the only way? It's the only language they listen to, he said. But I'm tired of speaking it. He looked at her then, really looked. You make me think of something I forgot existed, a future that doesn't come with blood on the doorknob. Sophie's heart stuttered, but she didn't speak. She couldn't. Because she felt it too. The way the air changed when he looked at her. The way the world tilted just slightly when he spoke like this. Like someone searching for a crack in the ceiling of his prison. Far away across the city, Vincent Marino sat alone in his office, the soft hum of surveillance monitors glowing in the dark. One feed showed Elias and Sophie in the penthouse. Too close, too still. He watched the frame without blinking. Love makes us weak. he murmured to no one. But maybe weakness is what keeps us human. Back at the glass tower, Elias reached out. His hand hovered for a breath, then found hers. Warm, steady, no promises, no confessions. Just the quiet recognition of two people who had no idea how or why they'd collided, but knew they couldn't untangle themselves now. The room held its breath. That night, Sophie didn't ask what would happen next. She didn't ask what this meant or how it could possibly survive in the shadows, because some part of her already knew. Love and danger had become the same thing. The call came just after midnight, slicing through the calm like a blade. Elias sat upright before the second ring. Sophie stirred beside him on the couch, blinking through half-sleep. His phone buzzed again. He answered, voice low, clipped. Yeah. A pause. Then, colder. Where? Sophie couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but whatever it said turned Elias to stone. He hung up without another word. What happened? She asked, sitting up. Elias reached for his coat. My father found him. Found who? The one who sold us out. He was already moving. Sophie stood. Then I'm coming too. Elias froze, coat half on. Sophie, this isn't... If I'm in your world now, I need to see it. All of it. Her voice was calm, unshaken. And Elias, after a moment, gave a small nod. Then stay close. Don't speak unless I tell you to. And if I say leave, you leave. No hesitation. The car ride to Red Hook felt like a descent, streetlights blurring past like dying stars. The city darker than usual, quieter, like it knew something was about to break. They pulled up to a rusted warehouse along the docks. Paint peeling off steel doors, the air thick with the stink of oil and old salt water. Inside, the sound of footsteps echoed off concrete walls. A single bulb swung from the ceiling, casting long shadows across the floor. In the center of the room sat a man bound to a chair, blood on his collar, head hanging low. Two guards flanked him, one with a knife still stained from earlier persuasion. Vincent stood behind them, hands folded behind his back, face unreadable. You brought her? He said without looking at Elias. She asked to come, Elias replied. Vincent turned his eyes on Sophie then. Not hostile, not warm, just measuring. Then let her see. The man in the chair raised his head. Sophie's breath caught. He was older, mid-50s, maybe more. Salt and pepper beard, sunken eyes, once sharp suit now crumpled and sweat-stained. Angelo, Elias said, voice like gravel. You taught me how to count bullets before I learned to tie a tie. You taught me how to shake a man's hand and make him fear me with just a smile. You were family. Angelo coughed, spitting blood. And that's why I stayed alive this long. Vincent stepped forward. You fed information to the Bianchis. You exposed my son. You invited blood into my house. Angelo laughed, broken and bitter. You think you're untouchable? That crown on your head? It's built on graves. People are tired, Vincent. They want change. Fear doesn't rule forever. Vincent tilted his head. But betrayal still dies the same way. He raised the gun slowly. Sophie couldn't breathe. Elias didn't stop him. He didn't even blink. The shot was sharp. Final. Angelo's body slumped sideways, blood pooling beneath the chair. The silence after was heavier than the noise. Sophie staggered back a step, not from horror, but from realization. This wasn't theater. It wasn't a lesson. It was justice, as the Marinos defined it. Elias looked at her, searching for something. Revulsion, fear, hatred. But she didn't flinch. Her voice was barely above a whisper. You knew he was like a second father to you, and you still let it happen. I had to, Elias said. If I showed mercy, it wouldn't be seen as strength. It'd be seen as weakness. and weakness gets everyone else killed. Sophie looked at him then, not with judgment, but with the deep, awful ache of understanding. So you chose the name over the man? Elias nodded once. I chose the lives that name still protects. She didn't touch him, didn't comfort. Just stood there in the dim warehouse while the world shifted beneath her again. Because now she understood what it meant to love someone trapped between blood and loyalty, between survival and soul. And the worst part was knowing he still had pieces of both. They didn't speak on the ride back. The car moved through Brooklyn like a shadow, windows blacked out, the world outside lost in raindrops and reflections. Sophie sat beside Elias, her arms folded tightly, her eyes on the city lights flickering through the glass. He didn't reach for her, didn't try to explain. Maybe because he knew there was nothing left to say that wouldn't sound like an excuse. At the penthouse, she walked in first. She didn't wait for him. She dropped her coat on the chair and went straight to the window, pressing her palms against the cold glass. The Hudson shimmered below them, so beautiful and vast it made her sick. Behind her, Elias stood silently. His shirt was still stained from the warehouse, just a touch of red on the cuff, like a ghost that refused to wash off. I saw you pull the trigger, she said finally. You didn't even hesitate. Elias exhaled, the sound quiet, hollow. Because I couldn't. No, she whispered, shaking her head. Because you didn't want to stop it. He stepped closer but didn't touch her. If I'd let him live, the Bianchis would have seen it as weakness. Everyone in our circle would have. There would have been a power shift before sunrise. Sophie turned around slowly. Do you even care about that anymore? He stared at her, jaw clenched, eyes burning with a question he didn't ask. Then, finally, he said, I don't want this life anymore. She blinked. Then leave. It's not that simple. Yes, it is, she said, louder now. You walk away. You drop the name, the bloodlines, the throne. You don't need this. You said so yourself. Elias laughed once, a sharp, broken sound. And go where, Sophie? What would I be without the Marino name? Alive, she snapped. You'd be alive. He looked away, as if that word hurt more than the bullets he'd dodged his entire life. After a long silence, he asked, Do you regret coming with me? Sophie didn't answer right away. She looked out the window again, the city stretching in every direction, limitless and unforgiving. No, she said finally, because now I know what love costs you. He moved beside her, close enough that she could hear his breath. And what does it cost you? He asked. She turned to him. Everything, she said, but I'd pay it. If it meant you could be free. Elias ran a hand through his hair, pacing now, restless. I've spent my whole life building a throne I don't want to sit on. And now I'm wondering if the only clean thing I've got left is you. Sophie didn't move. She let the words sit in the room, heavy and trembling. Then don't drag me into the dirt just to keep pretending you're still in control, she said. If you love me, Elias, don't make me watch you become something you hate. The city buzzed below them, cars, sirens, the heartbeat of a place that never stopped consuming itself. Inside, everything went still. Elias looked at her, really looked, like he was seeing her for the first time again. Then, slowly, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small black object. His gun. He placed it on the coffee table between them. Metal cold against the glass. I don't want this anymore, he said. Sophie stepped forward, her voice barely a breath. Then prove it. And for the first time since she met him, he looked like a man ready to walk away from everything he was born into, not because he was strong enough to destroy it, but because he was finally brave enough to leave it behind. They sat side by side in silence, staring out at a city that had never been theirs, wondering if love could survive in the space between blood and forgiveness. Neither spoke, because some things were too sacred for words, and some decisions, once made, echoed louder than gunfire. Morning crept into the penthouse slow and golden, brushing light across steel beams and sleepless eyes. Elias sat at the kitchen island, fingers tracing the rim of a half-drunk cup of coffee, his gun still resting quietly on the glass table like a final question no one wanted to answer. Sophie stood barefoot by the window, arms crossed, watching the city wake up. Neither of them had slept. Neither of them had tried. He spoke first. "Once I walk away, there's no going back." His voice was steady, but underneath it, something raw. "My father won't understand. He'll see it as betrayal. The families will think I'm weak. The vultures will circle. Everything will collapse in my absence." Sophie didn't turn around. Maybe it should. She felt him watching her, weighing that answer against everything he'd ever been taught. "And what about you?" he asked. "What happens when the dust settles, and I'm not Vincent Marino's heir anymore, just a man with scars and a past that never really leaves?" "Then we deal with it," she said. "One scar at a time, one day at a time." He stood slowly, walked to her side, his reflection blurring next to hers in the window pane. "You know, there's still time to change your mind." "Don't insult me," she replied softly. "If I was going to run, I would have done it the night you handed me that envelope." He smiled faintly. "That's what I was afraid of." They packed nothing. Just a change of clothes, a passport he'd kept hidden in the safe, a burner phone he smashed on the marble counter without hesitation. No money beyond what fit in a plain black duffel. No calls. No goodbyes. As they reached the elevator, Elias paused, staring at the gun one last time before picking it up, holding its weight for a long moment. Then, he placed it back on the table. Let the past stay armed. He was done carrying it. The car wasn't armored. It wasn't black. It was a dusty silver sedan, the kind of forgettable vehicle you pass on the highway and never think about again. They drove with the windows cracked, wind tangling Sophie's hair as the skyline faded behind them. No guards followed, no shadows hovered. Just road, horizon, and the pulsing quiet of two people who knew they were burning every bridge behind them. Back at the Marino estate, Vincent stood at the window of his study, one hand resting on the ledge, the other still clutching a photograph from 20 years ago. A boy with messy hair. A woman with eyes that softened the whole world. A day before the Empire demanded everything from them. He watched the security feed go dark. The cameras at the penthouse blinked out. The GPS on Elias's phone cut. And still, Vincent didn't move. "He's his mother's son," he whispered to no one. In the silence that followed, 1,000 choices echoed through the walls. Sophie and Elias drove until city gave way to field, until the skyline was just memory and the only sound was tires rolling over forgotten roads. No destination, no plan, just forward. She glanced at him, the morning sun warming his skin. "You okay?" He didn't answer right away. Then, quietly, "I don't know, but I think I'm free." She reached over, laced her fingers with his. "Then don't look back." And he didn't. Because sometimes, the bravest thing a man can do is not take the throne, but walk away from it before it destroys the last good part of him. The narrator's voice rises, soft but clear. That night, a waitress called a stranger's father for help. She didn't know she was saving the heir to an empire, or that she'd become the reason he'd leave it behind. And for the first time in years, neither of them felt alone. Not because they'd escaped the past, but because they'd chosen each other over everything it demanded. And that's where we leave them, for now. Two souls choosing love over legacy, walking away from everything they were born into just to find a little peace. If this story moved you even a little, I'd be honored if you gave it a like, shared it with someone who'd love it too, or left a comment. I read everyone. Thank you for spending this time with me. Wherever you are, I hope you're safe, loved, and chasing something worth the risk. Until next time, take care.